In the previous video, Young-jun was picking on Miso by getting closer to the woman, saying that if she didn't mind getting close to a man she barely knows in order to win the race in the company's games, then she wouldn't bother with him. However, the man ended up pulling her on top of him and the two of them stood with their faces very close to each other. I'm Nina, and in today's recap we'll be watching Partner Suspicious. Secretary Kim gets off the vice president's back when she hears the compress bag fall to the floor. When she returns to the room with more ice in it, she realizes that the man has fallen asleep. Young-jun has a nightmare in which a woman in red heels is calling him and he wakes up terrified. So the man asks Miso if she could sleep in the guest room like she did the other times, because he doesn't want to be alone tonight. However, the vice president soon drops the offer, after receiving a call from his brother telling him that he wants to see him. When Miso leaves Young-jun's residence and goes to his house, she bumps into his brother, not knowing who he is. The man found the woman beautiful right away. In the next scene we see the brothers talking. Sung-yeon says that he has decided to make this contact with the youngest because he has decided to forgive him for something that happened in their childhood, and we see that the vice president doesn't like his words very much, so he asks the man to leave and walks out of the room. The next day there's a lot of work to be done at the company. A group that competes in the market with the vice president's business is also preparing to open an art center and has decided to move up the opening to get more visibility than Young-jun's business. So in order not to be left behind, the vice president also postpones the opening of his art center, and now his employees will have to work hard to get everything ready for the opening. At the library, a small problem occurs while the man and his secretary Kim are visiting. The energy in the place goes down, and to pass the time, Miso chooses a novel, which she says is her favorite, to read. Young-jun ends up enjoying their time together in the library and doesn't even mind the blackout. Later, we see the man at her house and he's even picked up that book she said she liked to read. Secretary Kim is busy for the next few days thinking of a writer who could put on a big event to draw attention to the library they are going to open, and Miso thinks of Morpheus, a writer whose identity has not yet been revealed. So the woman writes an email to the writer and waits for his reply. Young-jun's brother decides that he's going to visit him in his office, and so that the man doesn't meet Miso, the vice president asks her to take the stairs through the building and go to a snack bar to buy a bunch of things. However, Young-jun didn't expect that the woman and her brother would accidentally bump into each other in the reception area, and at the very moment they do, they remember that they had bumped into each other before. Sung-yeon asks for Kim's secretary's number so that they can keep in touch, but the woman gives her a false contact and rushes off to the office with all those purchases. Miso even jokes to herself while waiting for the elevator, that if that man were Morpheus, the writer of the moment who writes about novels, she would even pass on his number, and little does she know that Sung-yeon, it's really him. Young-jun's mother invites her secretary Kim to meet her. The woman presents Miso with a gift and reveals that her aim was to find out if her son was in a good mood so that he could be invited to a family dinner at her house. Secretary Kim believes that the man has no reason to refuse, but when his mother asks him, Young-jun says straight away that he'll be busy. So the man's mother finds another way to get him to come to her house. The woman purposely forgets her purse on Miso's desk and says that she only wants her son to take her there in the evening. Young-jun ends up doing what his mother wanted, and after dinner, his older brother comes to talk to him. The man talks as if he wants to meet Secretary Kim, since their mother spoke so highly of her at dinner. However, the vice president keeps his mouth shut, and Sung-yeon insinuates that because the youngest doesn't say anything, he's afraid that the eldest will end up dating Miso. The two end up arguing about something that happened between them a long time ago, and in the end, Young-jun says that he doesn't hate his older brother, but that he despises him. Sung-yeon stands up and retorts that if it weren't for what the younger brother did at the time, he would be the one in the position of vice president. And Young-jun replies that his brother is weak and prefers to hurt people in order to get ahead, that even if that accident hadn't happened, Sung-yeon would never have reached his position. Sung-yeon ends up going berserk and punching the younger brother in the face, but then their parents arrive and beg them to stop. Then the older brother goes home, and while he's thinking about the things that have happened during the day, his cell phone starts ringing. It's his assistant telling him that there's an email with a very interesting proposal. As soon as the man goes to check it, he comes across the message that Miso had sent him, and now, I don't know if out of a tantrum or wanting to prove something to Young Jun, he agrees to work on the opening project as Morpheus. Meanwhile, Young Jun ended up going to his secretary Kim's house, and before he entered the apartment, she asked him to wait outside for a minute so she could tidy him up. In desperation, Miso ended up putting his clothes, which were on the chair, under the little cow he had won from the vice president. His secretary, Kim, takes care of the cut on his mouth, even though she doesn't know what caused it. To cheer him up, she invites him to eat some ramen that she has made. While he's cooking, the man keeps watching the things in Miso's room, and when the woman realizes that he's going to touch the little cow, she runs to stop him from seeing her clothes underneath, but ends up falling on top of him on the bed. Secretary Kim quickly starts to leave, and something unexpected happens. The man hugs her and tells her that he'd like to stay like this for a while and that he really wants to love her. Just as Miso starts to believe the man's words, he breaks the mood and says that this is the kind of thing that children's novel she likes says. Secretary Kim rushes into the kitchen to finish dinner, and although it's not what Young Jun is used to eating, he ends up enjoying it a lot. Soon after leaving Miso's house, the vice president goes to talk to President Park about what has just happened between him and his wife. And his friend says that when you're invited to eat ramen, it means that this meeting has a great significance, like someone telling the other person that they like them, indirectly. In fact, Young Jun ultimately lies to Yusik that this situation isn't about him and his secretary Kim, but about a cousin close to him who was having second thoughts. The next day, the vice president did something that had never happened in the 9 years they'd been together. He went to Miso's house to pick her up so they could go to work together. In the car, he surprised her once again. Young Jun bought coffee and something to eat so that his secretary Kim would be well fed for work. The man spent the whole day acting like a knight, something that didn't happen often. Meanwhile, the men's father goes to talk to the older man who started the fight. He wants to know when his son will apologize to Young Jun, because their mother is so upset by the situation that she can't sleep. The man also says that he shouldn't bother the youngest anymore, because Young Jun already has a lot on his plate with the company's projects, so if he gets upset, it will rub off on his employees too. In the next scene we see that Secretary Kim is called to reception because she has a visitor waiting, Sung-yeon. As soon as she arrives, the woman asks him how he knows her name and department, because she doesn't realize that the man is Morpheus. Miso just connects him to the memories of the times they crossed paths. However, Sung-yeon explains why she was there and that she was the one who called him. Embarrassed, Secretary Kim apologizes and the two go to an establishment to talk more while they eat. And Young Jun has lunch with President Park. The two talk about that supposed cousin of the vice president's, and his friend explains that the man should confess right away to the woman he likes, because they don't like being kept in the dark for too long. And after Miso and the writer meet, she gives him her real number this time, ashamed of what she did last time. At the company, the vice president is thinking about what his friend said, and he doesn't know how to act like an ordinary man, since Miso once told him that this was her preference. So Young Jun asks his employees about restaurants that ordinary people would like to go to, and in the end none of them can help him. The vice president had to surrender to searching the internet, and when he finds the perfect restaurant, he invites her to meet him there at 8 p.m. Miso is excited for the dinner, until she ends up being affected by the comments made throughout the day about her always wearing the same clothes, so she decides to go to a store to buy a beautiful dress to wear in the evening. When she's on her way to the meeting, Sung-yeon calls his secretary Kim to tell her that he's already got her answer about whether or not to take part in the project, but that he wants to tell her in person. Although Miso told him she couldn't make it today because she already had an appointment, he insists on seeing her for 10 minutes, and the woman ends up agreeing to meet him outside the restaurant where she made an appointment with the vice president. When he arrives, the two have a quick chat in which the writer tells him that he has agreed to take part in the inauguration, and when the man goes to hand him his book, which has not yet been released, the vice president appears. The man looks furious, Young-jun takes Miso's hand and leads her inside. The two of them argue in the establishment. The vice president says he doesn't want Morpheus involved, and if he's already said no, she should just obey. Secretary Kim is surprised by the sudden change in the treatment she's receiving from Young-jun and says that if it wasn't something important he wanted to say at dinner, she asks to leave and the man allows it. The vice president leaves the venue and goes straight to his older brother's house. As they talk, Sung-yeon says that she can see on the younger man's face that he's afraid that his secretary Kim will be stolen from him and, apparently, so will the company. However, Young-jun tells him that the man can take part in the inauguration and if he thought he had any influence over the group or Miso, he overestimated himself. The next day at work, Secretary Kim learns from the others that the vice president has ordered marketing to publicize the fact that Morpheus will be attending the inauguration. The woman is confused, because the last time she had seen the man, he had refused to get involved with the writer. So Miso goes to her boss's office and asks him never to cross the line again, or to make her rethink that he might be interested in her. After a while, Secretary Kim learns about another piece of information involving the vice president and the writer Morpheus. One of her co-workers tells her that the two are brothers, and now the woman begins to understand a little of her boss's anger the day before. For once Young-jun had let slip that he wasn't a big fan of his older brother and some of the things the man had done to him throughout his life. Later, the two end up making up and Miso even goes to work in the vice president's office at night. At one point Young-jun gets up from his chair and comments on what she had said earlier, adding that he wants to make her think again. The man slowly approaches Secretary Kim and she even closes her eyes and pouts to receive a kiss. Just when we think it's finally going to happen, the man's mind flashes to the woman in the red heels and he pushes Kim's desk chair away in a huff, causing the woman to run to the other side of the room. Of course, Miso is embarrassed and says she'll go home and take the next day off. When she's home, Young-jun writes her a message apologizing for what happened and his secretary Kim plays along, saying that nothing happened between them. The next day, the woman is bored, doesn't know what to do and remembers having asked that reporter she went on a blind date with to do some research on kidnappings that took place in the 90s, so the woman texts him to see if he's found anything. Later, Miso bumps into Young-jun and he tells her that he's decided to take a day off and that he'll do whatever his secretary Kim wants. Miso takes the opportunity to take him to embarrassing places and puts him through some experiences he's never had to deal with, like riding on a crowded bus. Meanwhile, GA is looking for an apartment to rent that's closer to her work, so she won't be late anymore, and the realtor explains that the woman can use the roof if she wants. There's a man who raises tomatoes and other things up there. The realtor adds that he's a bit of a cheapskate and even tells a piece of gossip that even though the rent is already cheap, he begged them to lower it a little more. When GA goes up to the roof to meet the man, she comes across GWI Nam, who works in his company and is known for having a lot of money and being very dedicated to his work. The woman promises that she won't tell anyone at work about her condition, but even so, GWI Nam keeps an eye on her for the next few days to make sure she doesn't let anything slip. Returning to Miso, she and the man have a very pleasant day and at the end of it, they both spend some time trying to catch a stuffed animal in those machines with a claw. After several attempts, Young-jun is willing to buy the machine, but his secretary Kim explains that the fun is in catching them like an ordinary person. The next day, Miso receives a call from the reporter. The man has found something about a kidnapping involving one of the Lee brothers. Unfortunately, he can't tell exactly which of the two it is, as he only got the information that the child was in the 4th grade, but the two brothers did the school year together. Secretary Kim goes to work thinking about what she's just discovered, and on the way, President Park passes her and offers her a lift home. Being a close friend of the vice president, Miso asks him if he knows anything about the affair of one of the brothers, but Yusik says that over the years of friendship, Young-jun has never said anything about it. The man asks her why she's looking for this case, and Secretary Kim says that she has some memories of when she was little. She's locked in an empty house for a day or so and there's a boy near her. Miso believes that this boy is the vice president, because of his phobia of hugging and the scar on his heel. President Park says that she could ask the vice president directly, but the woman believes that there must be a reason why he hasn't said anything before. The secretary, Kim, spends all day at work treating Young-jun differently, as if apologizing for not having recognized him before. In the next scene we see the vice president heading off to an important lunch. On the way he spots that teddy bear catching machine and decides to try it until he succeeds. When Young-jun returns to the company, he gives his secretary Kim what he took for her and the woman's eyes fill with tears. Later, Jie tells Miso that she found out that Morphew was kidnapped when he was little, because they discovered a text he had written on an anonymous blog, venting about it. Secretary Kim asks her to read it, and as she looks through the letters, memories of the place come flooding back into her mind. When Young-jun comes out of his office, he notices Miso's surprised face and she decides to ask him about what happened, whether it was really his brother who was caught, not himself, and the vice president confirms that it was Sung-yeon. Secretary Kim decides to ask him about the scar on his ankle and Young-jun says that he got it when he was young. After their conversation, Miso ends up bumping into Sung-yeon, who has gone to the company to sign a contract, and he takes the opportunity to apologize to Secretary Kim for not telling her earlier about being the vice president's brother. The two of them end up having a coffee together to talk about the time they spent together locked up in that empty house. Sung-yeon doesn't remember many things. Sometimes when you experience a big trauma like that, you can end up losing your memory of what happened. The man remembers that his brother jumped into the same class as him and stole his friends for himself. The boys made fun of him, according to Sung-yeon, and one day his younger brother took him somewhere and abandoned him, at which point the boy was kidnapped. Later, Miso goes to Young-jun's house to organize the books in his library. In the middle of her work, the woman finds a folder with several CVs of secretaries better prepared than her to work with the vice president. Secretary Kim begins to wonder why she was chosen out of so many better options, and Young-jun replies that it was simply because she was Miso. The woman then asks if he had met her before and the man replies that it would be impossible. What did you think of these episodes? I hope you enjoyed the summary. Leave your suggestions in the comments and subscribe. If you liked the video, like it and share it to help me. Until next time.